The Mid-America Veterans Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit business. Your donations serve to further the museum's mission of sharing and preserving the stories of our veterans. To donate, visit mavm.org and click on Donate. The content covered in this podcast is for general informational, historical, and educational purposes only. Discussions about historical events, military service, personal experiences, or sensitive topics are presented for educational and archival purposes. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the host and/or guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy or endorsement of the Mid-America Veterans Museum. Neither the organization, host, director, nor the guest shall at any time be liable for the content covered, causing offense, distress, or any other reaction.
Welcome to Operation Insight from the Mid-America Veterans Museum with your hosts, Jason Galvin and Sergeant Ethan Gross. Welcome back, family. We're at the museum tonight with an extreme special guest. It is our honor to host First Lieutenant Reps Hudson. And Ethan, go ahead and kick us off.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. So First Lieutenant Reps Hudson, U.S. Army, November 1965 until January 1969. Reps was discharged honorably after having been awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. Reps, it's a true pleasure to have you here with us tonight. I'm excited to talk about...
Pleasure being here.
Good. Well, I'm excited to talk about a lot of things in your life. You have quite the life story. There's a lot of material there. Let's start from the very beginning. I think it's fair to say that you have a special place in your heart for Carrollton, Missouri.
Yeah, I do. That's where I went to high school. It's over on the other side of the state, and I lived on a farm outside of town.
Sure. You worked on the farm.
I'm a farm boy.
And it was family land, if I understand correctly.
That's right. It's been in the family since before the Civil War.
That's incredible.
Wow. Awesome.
We were talking earlier, Rep, so I can say this pretty confidently. You're a historian. You're someone who enjoys learning about history and reading about history. Does the name Lieutenant General John C. McQueen ring a bell?
No.
So Lieutenant General John C. McQueen is from Carrollton, or was from Carrollton. He's passed away now. He served with distinction in World War II. He was actually the director of the Marine Corps Intel Corps. He helped select Camp Pendleton as a new Marine training facility and area, and he also fought in the Battle of Okinawa. So anyway, I was looking up Carrollton and was looking up famous people from Carrollton, and I'd recommend checking him out sometime.
McQueen, M-C-Q-U-E-N.
That's right, John C. McQueen, Lieutenant General.
Okay.
Marine Corps.
Second only to Lieutenant Reps.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. So since you have such an interesting life story and there is so much material to go through, we're going to kind of breeze through your childhood and breeze through your early life. I want to start with your time at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri.
Okay.
So you spent a year there. Tell us about that year at Westminster.
I was miserable at Westminster. I had never been away from home like that. I'd gone to boys' camp a couple of times, but nothing like this. So the way the upperclassmen were billeted, if that's the right word, was in fraternities. There were 6 or 8. I can't remember how many. I think it was 8. And as a freshman, you go in and they have rush week. So you visit all these different fraternity houses. And I ended up at Sigma Chi, which was okay. Barry Goldwater was the Sigma Chi, and that comes up a little bit in a minute. But I didn't like having to go down to the house on a Friday afternoon and clean toilets where the active members had made them as filthy as they could.
Sure, for the pledges.
For the pleasure, yeah. So I was there. JFK, John F. Kennedy, was killed on a Friday, November 22nd, 1963. And I was down at the house, like the other guys, and some of the actives, the upperclassmen, were cheering and were so happy that Kennedy had been shot. I was totally traumatized by that. I was traumatized by the fact that the president was killed, but then people cheering about it. And the reason they did was they were a bunch of spoiled brats, and they were all kind of young conservatives. I was learning about myself, and I'm not one of them. And they liked the fact they wanted Goldwater to be running against Kennedy.
Since he was a brother, Sigma Chi.
He was a Sigma Chi,
Yeah.
right. And so that's Barry Goldwater. He was a senator from Arizona, very conservative. And I said, I want to get out of here. So I got initiated. I went through that process, and then I didn't go to the House if I could help it.
I'm glad you brought this up about JFK's assassination in 1963. What I find interesting is you were at that time, you said you were kind of discovering yourself, starting to understand more about yourself. If I understand correctly, you were an atheist at that point in time.
Oh, you've done your research.
Would that be fair to characterize you?
Yeah.
That way? Okay.
I am again.
And Westminster was a Presbyterian school at that point until
Right.
1969.
Right.
Ah, okay.
Well, I mean, they weren't real holy about it, but the truth of the matter is that I was reading a lot of Ayn Rand,
Sure.
The Fountainhead,
Yeah.
Atlas Shrugged, all that stuff. I was really into that. And at one point, I think I was at Mizzou at the time. I went to the University of Missouri. Next year, I drove all the way to Kansas City, Kansas, to hear some recording of Ayn Rand talking about her philosophy.
Sure.
And I look back on that now and think how stupid I was. But that was just what I was doing.
Yeah.
I looked at the guys at Westminster and I thought, I don't understand people like this. They had been spoiled. They were just
Sure.
entitled. One of the guys was from Omaha, Nebraska, and he drove a red 68 or 69 Corvette. And I thought, oh, God. You know, we didn't have new cars in my family. They were all used. And it's just that I don't think they were used to physical labor, the kind of
Sure.
thing. I was used to feeding cattle, feeding silage, building fence, all that kind of outdoor work that you do on a farm.
It's funny you mentioned the vehicle thing, Reps, because you all had an old World War II Army Jeep on the farm. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that was down when I lived down near Mountain View, Missouri. But that was a different location.
Gotcha.
But we moved down to the Ozarks in 1951, I think. My dad had a wild hare and he wanted to have a ranch, and so we bought a ranch.
Yeah.
And he lost a lot of money, and I had a great time, learned to drive a Jeep. But, you know, I learned to be alone, and I learned to read. And I was telling somebody about this the other day. You know, if you put me down, I would just start reading. My wife gets mad at me because I read too much on my phone, but I'm not looking at trash. I'm reading the New York Times or the Guardian or, you know, the Wall Street Journal on my phone. And it's pretty good stuff to read. But I also learned to really appreciate the National Geographic and Life magazine. Our family, we had a big portfolio-sized book, Life magazine's Pictures of World War II. And I spent hours and hours and hours with that. We didn't have TV, and we didn't have a phone. I grew up without a telephone until I was 13 or 14. So, you know, you learn to do other things. So I went hunting, and I read a lot.
That leads to something I want to bring up just a little bit. It's a funny connection you're mentioning here, Reps. But before I do that, I just want to very quickly, I told you I was going to bring this up just momentarily. So Westminster, this is for our listening audience. This is an interesting tidbit of history. I mention this because Reps attended Westminster, and this particular historical event happened in the year of Rep's birth, 1946. Westminster College was the site of Winston Churchill's famous Iron Curtain speech. Something I didn't know before preparing for this interview with Reps was that speech was officially titled the Sinews of Peace speech.
Right. Yeah.
Which is something I don't think a lot of people know. And it's sort of interesting when you think about the official title and what it's commonly known as now.
Well, there's a quote, I can't remember it exactly, but something in the Baltic, from Trieste in the Baltic, I think it is, to some place in the Adriatic or something like that. And, an Iron Curtain has descended.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that vision.
Right.
It was right. And, of course, within a year or two, we have the Berlin airlift because, Berlin is being cut off. West Berlin is being cut off by the Soviets. And then Truman, who I really like, stood up to them.
Another Missouri boy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Independence.
Yeah, Missouri, a lot of interesting people have come from the state.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a General Maxwell Taylor, I believe it was, who grew up at a place called, I can't remember it. It wasn't far from where I went to high school. Now, later on, he changed. He didn't come back, and he became a pretty high-ranking general, and he was an ambassador to Vietnam at one point early on in the war, and so on and so forth. So, then there's John J. Pershing.
Sure.
Yes.
Wow.
And people like that. There's Walt Disney, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can't forget him. So they're important people who come from the state.
Well, thank you for letting me mention that thing about Westminster. I find that really interesting. You and I were speaking briefly about Winston Churchill, him as a leader. He was the right man at the right time for the Allied powers. And
I
for
recommend
the
that people go to Fulton just to see the museum.
world.
There's a museum there in the basement of the Wren Chapel, which they moved from England, which went through World War II, and they moved it it was in London, and they brought it over, big fundraising effort. They were talking about it when I was there, but they hadn't done it. And then they put this chapel together, and it's where people go get married. And, it's really a great place to go. It's an interesting place. And even the interstate highway has a sign that says, the Churchill Memorial is.
I've seen the signage, yeah.
Yeah, so it's worth it.
It is a very cool sight. And to know that Winston Churchill was on that platform giving that very famous speech, consequential speech, and President Truman was there as well.
It's an interesting thing, the way those things work.
Yeah. Well, so you had mentioned something that I want to tie together. You had talked about your love of reading, and you had mentioned this World War II book of pictures. And then also you talked about the effect that JFK's assassination had on you personally. What I find interesting is, correct me if I'm wrong, Reps, but at this point in your life, you didn't have an interest in joining the military. That wasn't yet part of your trajectory.
Never thought of it as a trajectory, but excuse me for coughing.
You're okay.
There's one other thing to add.
Oh, sure.
My father was in World War I. He was 56 when I was born.
Oh, wow.
He was born in 1891. So
I had missed that in my research. I'm glad you're mentioning it.
And so Daddy was hard on me. He used his belt on me when I did things he didn't like. And I worked for him, and he never paid me very much. We didn't have much money in my family at that time. But I look back on that, and I think I mentioned this in another interview, that when I went to the Army, one of my goals was to break away, to make something of myself. And I wanted to show my father that I could do it. And I wanted to be, that's why I went into combat. That's why I went in the infantry. I'm an 11 Alpha, I think it's called, officer. 11 Bravos are
Sure, the enlisted. Yeah.
But it never occurred to me to do anything less than that. I wanted to be where the action was, to be honest with you. I wanted to have the adventure. And I nearly lost my life, but I didn't. And I was a big fan of Ernest Hemingway and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, if you've gone through it and you survive it and you've got some good stuff to tell, or it makes you feel like you've accomplished something.
I have a question, Ethan.
Oh, sure.
So, Reps, thank you for sharing that. One of the questions I have for you is, how did you reconcile that desire for adventure, for the breaking away, with the other side of you that you mentioned earlier in the interview, if you know what I mean? The philosophies that you went to listen to, and the different books that you've read and the readings that you did. How did you reconcile, and did you even think about that in relation to the political environment that Vietnam was?
I didn't think about the political environment.
Okay.
That came later.
Okay.
That came when I got home. So, but I just wanted to have an adventure. This is very common. I think it's common today, and I think it was common 200 years ago.
Yeah.
People just want to go out and see the world. They want to go out and do things. I think the military is one of the best things that ever happened to me. Almost everything I've got in my life comes from my experience in the military. And, you know, because I got to go back to school, graduate school, undergraduate school, on the GI Bill. I learned a lot about people. and I think that's really important. I'm always surprised today when I'm around people who have not been anything near the military. They don't know anything about it. They don't know what a captain's doing when he's running a company, or any of that kind of stuff, or a pilot. I have a really good friend who was a medevac pilot in Vietnam, and we've been together quite a bit, and he's had to reckon with all the difficulties he's had, because when he rotated home, he left his crew behind, and then 2 of them were killed when the chopper went down and the blades hit the ground and that kind of thing, and that only left 2 others on the crew, the pilots and the co-pilot, and he was torturing himself for years and years and years about the fact that he had neglected his crew. Well, of course he didn't neglect his crew. He went home. But it took him forever to go to the wall, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., because there were names on the wall that he knew about. Mm-hmm. And it was a real struggle for him. But he's kind of healed up a little bit, and I've been part of that.
Excellent. Because
I wrote about him for the St. Louis Jewish Light and that kind of stuff. And another thing is he's Jewish, and I'm Jewish, and that's rare in the military. Then it's less rare now, but it was what it was. He had a hard time.
Jewish representation in the military?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there just aren't many Jews in the military. But, you know, I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's a little bit rare.
Sure.
And, you know, these are people of achievement. They don't stop. They just keep on going, doing something.
We've noticed. In fact, Ethan always brings up the fact that, you know, the community leaders that we interview, well, we only interview veterans, and they're all community leaders. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth stepping up and doing the job.
Right.
Reps, you had mentioned, you're getting ahead of me with this. I mean, as a journalist,
I'm pretty respectful of your research.
Well, you mentioned Ernest Hemingway, and that was exactly a name I was going to reference. So you transfer out of Westminster College. You had started attending the University of Missouri, Mizzou.
And I'm a sophomore.
As a sophomore.
Right.
You continue on ROTC, the path of ROTC.
Yes.
There's a defining moment for you in November of 1965. And I'm relating this to Ernest Hemingway because if I understand correctly, there is sort of that feeling of swashbuckling that you got from reading this article about the Battle of Ia Drang in November of 65.
Right.
would that be fair to say that you kind of referenced that, compared that to Ernest Hemingway?
Yes. This is really foolish. It's going to sound foolish, but I was inspired by that battle. Reading about it, it was pretty amazing, and it became a movie. We were soldiers. Mel Gibson played the part of one of the senior officer there. I can't think. Hal Moore. Fort Benning was named for him for a while until the other guys came in and changed it back. But I thought, damn, I want to do that. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I'm just a kid. I'm 19 years old, and I want to go to war. Doesn't make any sense. As I talked about my dad earlier, he would talk about the fact he was in the Quartermaster Corps, and in World War I, and he took care of horses and mules. He grew up with the same farm I did, right? And a lot of mules came from northwestern Missouri, went overseas, and that's how you move things around, guns and all sorts of stuff.
At that point in time.
So Daddy was in World War I, and he would talk about it, but he never got shot, and he never had a shot fired in anger at him. I mean, he saw the trenches. He talked about you walk into the trenches, and sometimes you would find the tops of people's heads would be there because they would cut a hole in and stick them in foot first, and that kind of thing. But I heard all that.
Yeah, which is kind of rare.
Yeah,
Jason and I have both experienced this, and I think you mentioned this in your interview with Larry in the VHP. There was a shift between World War II era, Korean War era, and Vietnam era in terms of how much you talked about your service and how much you talked about your experience in war. So it's kind of surprising your dad would even talk about those types of things.
Well, he would smoke his pipe and banging on an ashtray that was made out of an artillery shell. It's true. And that kind of thing. So I wanted to have something to talk about.
So you read this article about the Battle of Ia Drang.
I like that. I wanted to have something to talk about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
I want to be able to tell stories.
You read this article about the battle. It's inspiring to you. You want to be in the fight. You want that excitement. You also want to have something to talk about, something to kind of prove.
And I didn't care at all about the politics of it. I didn't care about stopping the communists. I just wanted to have the adventure of being in a platoon.
Well, it's funny you say that, and I think, Jason, what you were getting at earlier is exactly what I want to talk about later on. We'll just touch on it right now.
Sure.
Just for a moment.
I might have got ahead of us.
No, that's okay. It's okay. And I'm pretty sure I'm on the same page as you. You're not much into authority.
Nope.
And
how did you know that?
So I think what Jason was getting at, and he's exactly right. How do you configure someone who is fairly anti-authority, and then you compare that to someone who wants to fight for their country?
I didn't think of it that way.
How did you think of it?
It's fighting for my platoon.
Very interesting.
Very, very local.
Yeah.
You're not fighting for. I mean, I didn't think of myself as fighting for my country. I was trying to keep my men alive. Be honest with you, they were children. We were all children. I was 21 years old running a platoon. Can you imagine that?
It's hard to believe.
I see my son go through his 20s, and he's about done, and he would never never be able to pull that off. But you grow up pretty quickly. And you see this all the time if you read stories. I read a lot of them. Guys flying helicopters, doing this, doing that. They were in their early 20s. So in 1968, which was the year of the Tet Offensive and the year I got shot, I was 22. Just a kid. And I hadn't finished college, et cetera.
So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is it was either less about or non-existent about ideals and more about just straight adventure.
I had no ideals.
Okay.
It was adventure. It was to see the world. Hell, I got to go to Hong Kong on R&R. Can you beat that?
No. Farm boy to Hong Kong.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. The military does this for a lot of people.
Right.
It opens them up to the world, opens your eyes to the world.
Correct.
And you see it, oh, so that's how these people live. Or, now, not everybody reacts that way. If you go online and you look at what veterans have to say, some of them say, how stinky it was, talking about Vietnam, the food was bad, the people, they call the people gooks, all that kind of stuff. I never did that. Never. In fact, I told my men in my platoon I didn't want to hear that word out of their mouths. There's more to this because my first marriage was to a Vietnamese woman.
Okay, awesome.
We'll definitely get into that.
Let's get into that.
And just a quick note, Reps. This is something I wanted to mention. It really struck me when I was researching your story and watching a previous interview. Even though you were a young person, a young man, it seems to me, and I'm going to give you a compliment here, so I'm sorry in advance, but it seems to me that you were extremely mature for your age.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And you sort of understood. You sort of understood kind of reality at that point.
I never thought of it that way. God, thanks for the compliment.
Well, to me, it certainly comes off that way.
Well, I did research on this. I've written a lot about vets for the Kansas City Star and the Post-Dispatch. The thing is that we were such a young cohort. We were people in our teens. I look at this now, and I look at these war pictures and documentaries and stuff. We were all kids. We were just children. And World War II, you had people who were in the average age was around 23, 24, 25. So you had older people in the platoons who had experience and everything else. And they helped to keep the other people in line. In Vietnam, we didn't have that. You just had a bunch of kids. And with very powerful weapons and, all that kind of stuff.
I want to be respectful of our time, so I'm going to speed through a little. No, you're okay. Believe me, Reps. So the speed in which you decide to enlist is incredible to me. You see this article about Battle of Ia Drang. This is around November 14th or so is when that battle started. By Thanksgiving, you've decided you want to enlist. And so soon after that, you enlist as an E1, and by
the lowest enlisted rank.
Lowest possible, exactly. And the next thing you know, by the next year, early the next year, you're shipped off to Fort Leonard Wood for basic training.
Correct.
After basic training, you attend AIT at Fort Ord, California.
Advanced Individual Training at Fort Ord, California, a glorious place.
While you're there, this was interesting to me. I don't want to sit on this for too long, but you got to test the Stoner 63 assault rifle weapon system, which, funny enough,
became the M16.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah. Well, what I had seen was the Army never adopted this Stoner 63 as it was.
No.
The Marines and SEALs did, and they used it for a short time. But it became the M16. I wasn't aware of that.
5.56.
So they modified it, and it became the M16.
Right. 5.56 was the size of the round. It was very small.
What do you remember about testing that at AIT?
Well, they would take us out to the range, and maybe it would be different conditions. Maybe it was nighttime. Maybe it was daytime. Maybe it was raining. They were just having us use it to see if it worked.
And to see the wear and tear and how that affected it.
Yeah, and I remember by that time there were stories in the paper or in the news about how these weapons would jam and people were killed and so on and so forth because of that. It made me, when I was a platoon leader, it made me think very hard about how clean I wanted my weapons to be, my men's weapons to be.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to sit on their shoulders and make them clean it, because that's really important.
That leads to malfunctions if it's not cleaned properly.
I mean, you don't want a gun to lock up.
Yeah.
I carried an M16 as well, but it was a different kind. It had a full collapsible stock.
Gotcha.
And it seems the same round. I mean, but I never used it. I never fired it.
It was just very interesting to me that you were probably one of the first soldiers to in the Army to test that weapon system. Again, because I want to get to your Vietnam experience, but as someone who also attended school in California. Give us maybe one or two stories about your time in California, what you enjoyed about, and maybe an interesting story.
Well, there was a guy from the other side of the state of Missouri. He and I got along pretty well. I can't remember what the town is called now. But we decided we wanted to go to San Francisco. In 1966, the commercial buses were like really old buses. They weren't anything like they are today. And we went up to see what we could see. And he knew a guy who was an officer, a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, at the fort. We got to go because he had this friend. We got to go to the officers' club. Now, if you're an enlisted man, you're eating in barracks or you're eating in a mess hall or something like that. But if you're an officer, you're eating at a little different kind of place.
Yeah.
And I said, "Damn, I like this. This is
I can get used to this.
This is for me." And that was a motive. That was something I kept in my mind when I was going through officer candidate school, because that was pretty rough at times, a lot of harassment and stuff. But I really wanted to do it. I didn't want to be on the bottom. That was not me. I didn't grow up that way. I wanted to be something that was more respected than that, I guess. Now, I'm not saying anything against people who are enlisted at all.
Sure.
But I liked the deference that people would pay to us, an officer, particularly more than a second lieutenant, which is nobody. But a first lieutenant or captain or major or something like that, they get treated pretty well.
You knew what you wanted your experience to be like.
I knew. I wanted to do. That was part of what I wanted to do.
Now, at that point in time, you had applied for OCS. Isn't that correct?
No, I had applied, I think, when I was in basic at Fort Leonard Wood.
Gotcha.
We had a sergeant who, we were in formation one day, and he said something to the effect that, some of you guys are pretty smart. You could be my boss someday. And if you want to, you can apply for officer candidate school. And I applied, and I got interviewed, and I got passed. I graduated 13th in my class out of 165 or 70, and a lot of them had dropped out. So I was in the top 10%.
So let's move on to that. You go to the officer club up in San Francisco. You say, this is the life for me. And then you are then transferred for OCS to Fort Benning in August of 1966. We'll go through this kind of quickly as well, but an interesting point, you already mentioned you graduated 13th in your class. That is a great way to preface the fact that at first you were not a good officer candidate, and you had to understand how to play the game in order to get by. Tell us about that.
Well, I didn't like standing in formation and being yelled at by a guy who was a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant who was my training officer, or TAC officer, we call him, tactical officer. Lieutenant Smart was his name, and he was tall, and he had kind of reddish hair and blue eyes, and he would harass the hell out of us, which is what you're supposed to be able to put up with.
Yeah.
And I remember one time they were trying to get us to give money to, I don't know, some fund, and we were all in front leaning, in a leaning rest position, push-up position, and I refused to do it. I thought, damn, I'm putting my life on the line, and you want me to give money too? That's a little much. Eventually, I gave up, and I did, but I was the last one in my platoon to surrender to the TAC officer, and I think he respected me for that, because some people would quit right away.
Sure.
I would get up real early in the morning in the barracks. I get up before anybody else so I could go into the latrine, and go into the latrine and take a shower.
For privacy's sake.
And shave and not have to be hassled by other people. I like that, you know. I don't know if that's authority or not, but it's just, like I said, I was a farm boy. I grew up I had an older sister, but she wasn't around. So I was kind of like his only child. And I was used to doing things my way. And you get in the Army, you don't get to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't. I think, I mean, I agree with the training, but I didn't want to be, I still want to be special in my way. And that's how I did it.
Did things click for you at OCS then? Is that what I'm understanding? You sort of understood you had to behave a certain way to get by.
Yep. Oh yeah. I loved OCS. I really did. I mean, I loved almost all of the Army.
Sure. Yeah.
I thought OCS was really good. I would get out and I would have people salute me. I thought that was kind of neat, and all that kind of stuff. But you know, I like the idea of having responsibility. I wanted that. I wanted to see if I could do it, but if I could do it, I wanted to do it.
So you graduate 13th in your class. You graduate with honors and distinction. You are assigned to the Big Red 1 next. Is that correct? Is that your first duty station?
No, I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia.
Oh, that's right.
And I was
sorry.
a training officer
That's
there.
right, Fort Gordon.
I got in trouble there, too.
Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, again, it goes back to this religion thing. They wanted, I don't know, the battalion commander or something wanted us to support, what was he wanted us to do? He wanted us to go to a church service. And I was assigned to be, I've never read my officer's efficiency report because I'm scared to see what they said. But I was supposed to go to this ceremony, and it was my company. And I was the officer in charge, to be the officer in charge. And I didn't go because I didn't think the Army had any business pushing a religion down my throat. And as I said, I think in the interview with Larry, I was really ahead of my time, ahead of things. You know, because I don't know that they do it today. They might, but I don't know that they would be as harsh about it. So that was on a Sunday, so word came down to the company that I needed to be at the battalion headquarters to meet the colonel, lieutenant colonel, and he was going to read me out. And he did.
And you're a fresh lieutenant at this point.
Yeah, second lieutenant. And I reported to him, and I was standing there at attention, and he just chews me out right and left. And he said, Lieutenant, if I were out in the field and, you know, I needed to have you run my flank, be at my flank with your platoon, you wouldn't do it. And I said, yes, I would, sir. That's different. That's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Not this other stuff.
You had this distinction between what's necessary and what's unnecessary.
I thought so.
No BS, just straight work.
Yeah.
Boring.
So after Gordon,
yep,
that's when my mistake. That's when you go over to the 1st Infantry Division, and that's when you're told if you're going to be one, be a Big Red 1, which you didn't like to hear very much. You found that kind of corny.
Well, I thought it was terribly corny. And I think I said in the interview with Larry, God, is this the sense of humor they got around here? But yeah, I didn't know what grace that was to go there because, you know, you read about the 101st doing this and somebody else. The Marines get a lot of attention, but we got a lot of action and we were a good unit. I think I love being in the 1st Division.
So when did you deploy to Vietnam?
I didn't go directly. I had to go down to Panama first for jungle training. So I did 2 weeks in Panama, and then I told my parents goodbye twice. I went to Charleston Air Force Base in South Carolina, and then down to Panama for jungle training. That was just to learn how to walk around in the jungle and shake your boots out in case there was a snake or a spider inside, and eat the stuff that they had. And
get used to the climate.
Yeah. And I did. And then I went back home, and I had to go. Then I had a few days of leave. And then I went back and got on the plane and flew to San Francisco. And then I got to, I don't know what the Air Force Base is, Travis, I think, right outside of San Francisco, and got on a plane, and off I went.
Can you remember when you arrived? It was before the Tet Offensive began.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was. Tet was the last.
January 68 is when it started.
January 31st.
Yeah.
And this was October 67.
October 67. Okay. So you arrive in Vietnam. two things specifically that I wanted to bring up. What I think is probably your most, well, actually you quoted it, your most invigorating moment, but also your scariest moment in Vietnam. Let's start with the scariest. The scariest was a mortar attack. Tell us about the mortar attack you experienced.
Well, I had a little background first. We were out in an OP, operational, we had
Sure.
105 howitzers in our base. And I think it was the same time that the mess hall back in our base camp sent us a Thanksgiving meal. So they put the tables out, put the turkeys out, stuffing, all that kind of stuff, and we had a nice meal. And then we all went back to our foxholes, and pretty soon, here come the mortars. And mortar attacks are really scary because you can't hear them coming. They land on you, and there you are. And the thing I realized later was that while we were there in that position, there was a Vietnamese guy who came in and cut hair. He was the barber. And then I'm pretty sure that he marked off, he stepped off the distance to us because they didn't have to adjust their fire. They were right on top of us, and nobody was hurt. That was what was so surprising. Within a day or two, we went out on patrol at night. I think we started out about 4 o'clock in the morning and walked over to a place in a rubber plantation. It's the Sela Village, and we got it pretty well set up, and bam, the shit hit the fan. Excuse me. It was really interesting because that was a fight that was my very first one, and I think it lasted. I'm guessing it lasted a couple hours.
I didn't know. I'm glad you're mentioning this. I didn't realize those were so closely connected.
Yeah.
The scariest moment and then the invigorating moment.
Well, yeah. I mean, I loved it in a way. I mean, I thought, this is pretty cool. But if you're standing there trying to direct your platoon or lying there trying to direct your platoon and you're in a rubber plantation and the bullets are hitting the rubber trees and knocking, putting holes in them.
Sure.
And rubber sap, which is white, comes dripping down. That was interesting. And I thought, well, this is really something. This is what war is all about. I really did, and we had several people killed in that battle. First sergeant was killed. There was a crazy platoon leader, another lieutenant,
who ran towards the front line.
Who ran
out
in front of the front lines, and he had an RTO radio telephone operator with him who had to follow him wherever he went.
Sure.
And that guy got shot in the head.
The lieutenant, yeah.
No, the lieutenant he didn't get hurt.
Oh, the radio operator got shot. Oh, wow.
Yeah, the RTO got hit. And that struck me as really unfair.
Yeah.
Of course, you get kind of nihilistic about all this stuff after a while because you think, there's no sense to this.
Sure.
I mean, my friend Eric wonders why was he allowed to survive, but his buddies from his...
It's the survivor's guilt.
Yes, survivor's guilt is a really strong thing for people who've been in combat.
You're being kind of modest. I want to get into this a little bit more. In the interview that I had watched of yours to prepare for this, there were two things that were incredibly impactful when I heard them. One of which was that you stood up in the middle of this firefight, and instead of feeling terrified, you felt invigorated.
Right, exactly.
Tell us about that feeling.
Well, again, I challenged authority. The battalion commander came to me, and he wanted to take one of my machine guns. We had 2 in our platoon. And I argued with him. Can you imagine that? I mean, this guy's a lieutenant. This guy's a lieutenant colonel. We're under fire, and he wants to take my gun. And I argued with him. I didn't want him to take it. Now he did, and
sure,
that's and I didn't get punished for that or anything like that. But it was I found the firefight to be stimulating, invigorating, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was kind of a feisty smartass, but my men did all right.
The other thing I wanted you to speak on, because I think you have a very interesting perspective on this, and it's almost the feeling I got from hearing you describe it in the previous interview. It almost seemed like you could make time stand still and you could observe all these things as they were happening. You talked about being able to watch the order of battle as it occurred. I would, both Jason and I would be very interested in hearing your perspective of what you saw, when you saw it, and how you processed it in real time.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that fight began. We established a perimeter around this village, and then we were fired upon. A small arms fire. The other side didn't have artillery on this particular case, but I thought it was interesting to watch how the firefight unfolded. So we had small arms fire back and forth, and then my lieutenant colonel, battalion commander or somebody, called in for air support and artillery support. And then you could see this thing taking shape. And I found that to be really, really interesting because we often don't think about that. And, you know, you do what you can do and hope that it works. And they broke it off, and they broke off, and we stopped. And that was it.
Was that a moment? It's kind of funny. It seems like you have these moments where things click for you, Reps. Was that another moment where things clicked when you realized, oh, now I understand why there's levels of authority.
Yeah.
Now I understand why there are orders given and they should be followed because there's a pattern to battle.
Well, yes. I mean, you've got to have people do what they are told to do. They've got to stand fast and be steadfast and that kind of thing. You can't have people, you know, the way we live and talk about these kinds of things today, it's like that there's something wrong with this. It's not. The key is the training of the officers and the sergeants. And those are the people who make it work. And, you know, if you're given an order to go do something, you can't, like that colonel said to me, you wouldn't take care of my flank. Well, of course I would take care of his flank because that would be different. But you know, you've got to do those kinds of things. Somebody above you, we hope, has better perspective on it than you do.
Sure. And
they know where you should go. I read a fair amount about World War II and all these other things, and you know, you got to outthink the other side.
Yeah.
And you've got to stand fast, and your rifle has to work. You have to be with your buddies. You have to take care of your buddies. All that kind of stuff.
This segues into another story I was hoping you would tell us almost perfectly, actually, because you're talking about the discipline it takes to be a good soldier and the discipline it takes to survive combat. There was a soldier of yours, if I understand correctly, who was not a picture of perfection when it comes to being a soldier, Segura.
Michael Segura.
Tell us about that experience.
Well, he's my one regret. I couldn't reach him. I wasn't smart enough, mature enough to reach him. He was a Hispanic guy from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he was angry, and he had a chip on his shoulder.
He was a draftee.
Like I said this when Larry and I talked. I don't like working with draftees. You don't know what you're getting. So anyway, Emmanuel Segura was a guy I couldn't talk to. He just didn't like it, and I don't blame him because he'd been drafted. You know, and probably
he didn't want to be there.
He didn't want to be there, and he deserved to be there. But there he was, and I got mad at him, and I put him on the machine gun and made him carry ammo. And of course, that was punishment right there because it was heavy, in addition to the other things he had to carry. And when we got our second big firefight in our company, I sent him out and a couple other people out on what we call a cloverleaf, small little. You're in a line like this.
Tactical movements.
Yeah. And he got shot. Nobody else was shot, but he was. That was really a scary fight because I was down in the dirt, and I could see bullets hitting right in front of my face. And that's what I said. Reps, if I survive this, I'm going to go back to college and make something out of myself. That's what I said. I'd still say it. Anyway, his body started to burn. The clothes on his body started to burn. And it was such an ignoble thing to happen to him. I mean, I'm going to go off track a little bit here. I've had 4 people whose deaths I feel responsible for. And Segura's was the first. And I have thought about going to find his family and say that I regretted what happened. And I changed my mind about that. I said, they've accepted his death. Why go back and
reopen wounds?
Yeah, why go back and dig it up and hurt them again? I thought in one way it's an honorable thing to do, in another way it's very selfish. So I decided
it would have helped you close a chapter.
Right, it would have helped me, but it wouldn't help them. Yeah. And I feel that way about 3 other guys too.
If you don't mind speaking on the other 3, tell us their stories and what happened.
Well, there were 2 guys who were in our company who were driving a 3/4 ton truck, which is not very big. And we were on Highway 13, which runs north and south from Saigon up to Cambodia. And we were my platoon was supposed to clear the road of mines. And I think we got a late start that morning, and we hurried, and I think we missed a mine. So here come my two guys from my company, Sakurka, and I can't remember the other guy's name. But they were just, moseying along up there, and they got on the side of the road because there was a convoy coming the other way, and they hit a mine. And it blew such a huge hole in the ground. And it blew it through the truck way up in the air and down again. And I feel responsible for that. The 4th guy was just when I was back in the rear. He came to me because I was the XO, executive officer in the company, and he wanted me not to send him back to the field because in a month or so he was going to rotate home. And he kind of begged me. And I said, I can't do that. I got to send you back. Next time I saw him was when I identified his body. That's the hardest one.
Yeah.
And I remember this picture in my mind of the helicopter coming in to the base camp, and his legs were hanging out because they laid him in crosswise. So
why is that the hardest one for you?
Because I feel responsible for it.
It feels more direct. He had come and asked you, and you had said, I can't do anything about it.
I think that's it. If you're going to be in the infantry and you're going to be an officer or a senior NCO, a non-commissioned officer, you're going to have to do things like this. That's going to be part of it. You tell somebody to go do something and they get hit, that's it.
Sure.
You have to walk away from that, but you can't. At least I couldn't.
Yeah.
I wanted to go. He's the one I really wanted to track down and go visit his family. But again, there wasn't anything to be gained by that.
Sure.
Now, one of the 2 guys who died in the 3/4 ton truck, one of the guys had a sister. And I ended up talking to her on the phone and telling her what I knew. And I said, I feel so bad about this. And she said, it's okay. It's in the past. We put it away. There was a guy who was doing research on veterans in his area in Virginia, and he came across this guy. And so we got together over the phone.
She was completely forgiving.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I'm wondering if family members of people that go to war almost reconcile that before their family member goes over to battle, or it's some level mentally,
I think
subconsciously,
you had to in Vietnam.
Right?
I think you had to in Vietnam. That'd be my feeling.
Right, because it put you through torture almost if you hadn't almost subconsciously committed yourself to
And you stayed
could
hopeful.
yeah you
instead.
stayed hopeful. Yeah, I hope I didn't overspeak there. Just my thought.
I talked about this with my mother when I got back. And she said, I prayed for you every day. She was a very religious person. And she said, I just prayed and prayed and prayed. And she said, I brought you home. And I said, very unkindly, what about all these other mothers who prayed and their children didn't come home alive? Shouldn't have said that. But you touched on something. How do you have, if you have a relative overseas in a dangerous situation, you have to try to figure out how to deal with that. There's a scene out of a movie, I can't remember which one it was now. I think it might have been Saving Private Ryan or something like that, where these cars, this car that's a military, it's official car, pulls up in the driveway, and the mother looks out and sees the car and sees the officers getting out of the car, and she just falls on the floor. I think it's realistic, very realistic. You know,
I can attest.
Yeah, you can. It you know, that's war. So we either bury it or we deal with it.
Sure.
And that's where a lot of alcoholism comes from, and a lot of misbehavior comes from veterans, because
Negative coping mechanisms.
they've got things that they did or
that are unresolved.
and they
Yeah.
wish they hadn't done it or what.
So this is really interesting to me. I'm glad you mentioned this earlier. Sort of you have bookends sort of in your military career in a certain way. November 63, JFK's assassinated. That's not quite, if I'm understanding you correctly, that's not quite a moment where you feel this calling, but it's a moment where you feel sort of this weight of a national event, really an international event. It had a lot of different consequences globally, JFK's assassination. And then the day before MLK's assassination, you are shot.
Right.
April 3rd of 1968. Tell us about that experience of being shot.
Well, I had rotated off the line, and I was assigned to the rear, to my base camp, to my company base, and I got to go on R&R, rest and recreation, to Hong Kong for 5 days. So I did that, and it was fun and all that kind of stuff. And I get back to my company area, and I think within a day or two, we learned that we had lost some leaders, some platoon leaders, and I had to go back out in the field. So I went from third platoon to first platoon, and we were out hiking around doing something, I don't know, on a patrol, and I was with people I didn't really know very well because it was a different platoon. And my medic was brand new, and medics are really important people in these battles because they're the ones that are going to save your life if anyone can. And they have dangerous work to do.
You need them to have nerves of steel.
Well, you need to have something. You got to get going.
Yeah.
You can't just sit around and think about it.
Yeah.
So we were walking along, diddy bopping along, and suddenly all hell broke loose, and we get in a firefight. And we were getting hit. There were several people getting hit. One guy got shot in the finger, lost the finger. And I look over, and my medic is hunkered down behind an anthill. Anthills in Vietnam were big structures, if you will, solid dirt. And I thought, damn, I got to get him moving. So I ran over to him, tried to run over, to get him to get out there and start taking care of people. Because it was like his first or second day in the field, and he was scared to death. I mean, he was just trembling. I don't blame him, but I can't let that stop me.
Sure.
And as I got up and ran toward him, I got hit in the chest on the right side, and that knocked me down. My old medic from my other platoon came to take care of me. And he said later that I was as white as a sheet. I didn't know that. I guess I went into shock for a little while. So that was that that firefight. I only had 3. That was enough.
Enough adventure.
Well, you come close to when you come close to getting killed.
Yeah.
You have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah,
Sure.
for sure.
And that was it.
What do you remember about the next day, or maybe it was a few days later, in terms of the news about Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination? How did that strike you?
Well, I wasn't as well informed, and my mind wasn't as. I hadn't made up my mind about Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement like I have now. But I thought, Jesus, are we? What is this? Here you have JFK in 1963, and then King in '68, and then you have
Bobby Kennedy.
Then you have Bobby Kennedy. But I did something that most people didn't do. I ordered a subscription to Time magazine so I have something to read. And I would get that. It would come in the mail, a mail call. And I would get that, and I could kind of keep up with world events. Most of the people in my platoon or my company didn't give a shit about that. They didn't care about that. I did. I guess that distinguished me a little bit. But I really didn't understand what was going on the home front. That came later. That came when I went back to college and stuff like that. I began to understand that.
But you did, if I understand correctly, Reps, you did at some point see how the war was going to go.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to hear your perspective on
Same.
Vietnam War.
Me too.
Well, I didn't know anything about it when I went over there. I met a Vietnamese woman that I kind of fell for and eventually married, and we have a daughter who's now 50 years old, but we're not married any longer. But I kind of became sympathetic to the Vietnamese people. That's a really old history. China occupied them for 1,000 years. I have a lot of affection for the Vietnamese people and the food.
Oh, yeah. I love the Vietnamese food.
Yeah.
But what was your question?
I'll ask it again, but you just reminded me of something I wanted to mention. It's a really interesting tie-in with your father, actually. Not directly, but in general. You probably know this. There was a Vietnamese representative who went to the League of Nations after World War I and was pleading.
Ho Chi Minh.
It was Ho Chi Minh, exactly. I think he went by a different name at this point in time, but that he became Ho Chi Minh. He was pleading with U.S. representatives, I think British representatives, French representatives, the victors of World War I. He was pleading for representation and I think in some way resources and service for Vietnam at that point. Well, his pleas went unheard. No one took a meeting with him.
The French weren't going to have that because they were the colonial power. So, yeah, that's true.
And so he went back.
I became sympathetic to the Vietnamese. I really did. And the longer I live, the more I respect them. Especially the guys who were in the field fighting and the commanders and stuff like that. They endured a lot. And they didn't have a lot to throw back at us. I mean, they had, later on, artillery and tanks and stuff.
Sure.
But in the early years, it didn't have that. I'm reading a book right now by a journalist from Britain named Max Hastings. The title is Vietnam. It's like 600 pages long, and I'm about halfway through it. I read a chapter every so often, but it makes those kind of points that, and it made me very sympathetic to the Vietnamese people. And when you say Vietnamese people, there are a whole bunch of different kinds of people.
Sure.
There are those who like Ho Chi Minh. There are those who like the South, and that kind of stuff.
The question I had asked, what you're saying is perfectly fine. This is addressing it in a way. Was there a point in time that you can remember when you knew the U.S. was not going to win the war?
Well, I think I said this in my interview with Larry. I could see pretty quickly that we weren't doing very well.
What led you to believe that?
I don't know. It was, small unit fights, and
Was there, this is something Jason and I have heard from other Vietnam vets, the strategy of entering a village, killing the Viet Cong, killing who you think is your enemy, and then you exit that village, and that village is just filled up again with your enemy.
That's the nature of guerrilla warfare. I mean, we didn't understand what we were doing.
Yeah.
I look back on this and I think we threw so much artillery and
Bodies.
And, the 58,000 names on the wall, Vietnam Memorial, and all that kind of stuff. They lost millions of people. The North lost 2 or 3 million.
Wow.
It's not a figure you hear.
No, I don't. I've never heard that myself.
People don't put that in. They don't. They only look at it from one point of view. But the Vietnamese, the South lost a lot, and the North lost a lot. And I admire them, the North, the communists, for trying to gain control of their own country in their own way, and not have it be. I mean, we were neo-colonialists. We didn't see ourselves as that, but that's what we were. We were foreigners. We didn't belong there. I remember coming back home after I got out, and I was walking around the square in Carrollton where I went to high school, and one guy came up to me. He said, "Well, what are we doing over there?" I said, I really don't know. Because my perspective was small unit stuff. I wasn't looking at the big picture. But when I began reading about it and learning more about it and following it more, I realized the signs were everywhere. And if you look at the Pentagon papers and read them, there it is. It was very important that we knew that.
Yeah.
But people on the home, they didn't want the home pet to know that.
So you get out January 1969. As I said again, I want to re-mention it because it's worth mentioning. You had been awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star with Valor. Not long after that, you go back to Vietnam, by this time as a civilian. So just give us a taste of you going back to get married.
Well, I don't think she knew what I was up to. But she didn't, I remember getting a letter from her, but she didn't say it was her. She said, she wrote, and I recognized her handwriting, but she said that Jung has died. That was her name, was Jung, N-H-U-N-G. And I didn't believe it because I recognized her handwriting. And she'd said, don't come back or anything.
At this point, you had fallen in love with her, essentially.
Yeah, sure. And so I wanted to go back. So as quickly as I could, I got out. I was at a little base, a reserve training camp base in Seattle, Washington. Nice place to be, by the way. Anyway, I was there as an advisor to reservists.
Okay.
Who were meeting like twice a month or something
Weekend
like that.
warriors.
Yeah, right. And I decided that I wanted to go back to see Neil. I wanted to go back and get her. So I finagled money out of my parents, and I bought a ticket, and I got on a plane. And I believe the airline was Braniff because it doesn't exist any longer, but it had kind of multicolored tourists wore funny-looking uniforms and outfits and stuff. Anyway, I'm flying back to Vietnam. I get back there, and I track her down, find her, and she's got a place for us to stay. And I need to make money, a little bit anyway. So I started looking around for a job. Saigon in 1969 was really hopping. There were a lot of journalists there, that kind of thing. And I had an English teacher in high school who told me I could write. So I I went to various places that needed reporters, and I went to the Agence France Presse, French, and the bureau chief spoke English, thank goodness. And he said, you should go to see George MacArthur over at the Associated Press. Well, I hardly knew what the Associated Press was. I hadn't studied any journalism. I just knew that I kind of liked
Even
it.
though you'd gone to Mizzou, funny
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. And, no, I was studying agriculture when I was at Mizzou. But anyway, I went to the AP, Associated Press's bureau, in the heart of Saigon, right downtown. And I talked to George MacArthur. He was from Georgia. He'd gone to school in Georgia. He had been in World War II. He was, was involved in some of the South Asian fighting.
Sure.
And he'd been in Korea. I mean, he was really kind of an old hand. And he had a bureau there of really
Pulitzer Prize winning journalists.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
photographers.
Peter Arnett was there. George Horst Foss was there. He was the photo chief. Nick Ut, who took the picture of the burning girl. Napalm Girl.
Yeah.
Those were the people in the bureau. That was heavy company.
It's incredible.
So he hired me for $100 a week in American dollars, which he showed me how to convert that into piastres, I think they were. There was a guy from India, a couple of floors down, who was a money changer, which was illegal, but I did it anyway. He showed me how to do it. So that's how I lived. That's how Lynn and she has an American name now, Lynn, Lynne. That's how Lynn and I lived. We lived out in a cold water flat, literally cold water flat, out near the Hudson Air Force Base.
How did you reckon with the fact that Lynn had sent you a letter announcing her death, which you were pretty dubious of, and then you arrive and she has a flat for you to live in? Was it welcome open arms, I'm glad you're alive, or was there an argument about, well, why did you send that letter?
No argument. I understood. I mean,
Is it her way of trying to get you to come back for her?
No, I think it was her way not to protect herself from a broken heart.
I see.
I think that was it.
She was trying to close a chapter in her life.
Yeah. And I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah. Eventually, you get her visa, and you return to the United States. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that within a year of arriving in Vietnam?
Yeah. I arrived in March, I think it was, or late February, and she and I left in late July. So I was there about 5 months or 6 months.
And I want to reference this, or I want this to be clear to the audience. The war was still raging on at that point.
Yeah.
So it's just
nothing was changing.
It's just fascinating to me.
I read stories from the correspondents from the AP were writing. You know, there's a real art to this. They go out in the field, they get hooked up with some company, and they just hang out, stuff like that. It's much different today because you have better communications, but they were working with, if they took pictures, they were using film. They had to write captions, what we call cut lines, captions with each picture, if they thought they were good, and they would send those by somebody who could take it back to somebody who could get it back to the office. It was a
well-oiled machine.
Well, yeah, and also it was iffy. Do you remember the picture of the guy getting shot in the head?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that was taken by Eddie Adams, and Eddie he didn't want to be that way. He was a kind of a nice guy. He liked to take beautiful pictures and stuff like that, and that was during the Tet Offensive, and it was in Saigon, and he just happened to be in the right place at the right time and shot the picture, which won a Pulitzer Prize, if I remember. And it was interesting because the AP had files of developed film, and you could hold them up to the light or something and see. So I looked at all this one day, that Eddie Adams pictures of the guy's gun going
Sure.
up.
The different frames of it.
Yeah, I loved it. There was a guy who came in the office one day named Sean Flynn, Errol Flynn's son, the actor.
Oh, wow. How about that?
Yeah, he's a very handsome guy, very suave, all that kind of stuff. Well, he had disappeared in Cambodia. Nobody knew what happened to him.
To this day?
Yeah. I
Wow.
mean, I read somebody just the other day.
Wow.
You know, people would go up to Laos or Cambodia to buy, I don't know, drugs of one kind or another, bring them back. So some of these reporters and photographers were doing things like that, and most of them were not. I was fortunate enough to work with a guy named George Esper, Esper. I think he's a relative of the guy who was Mark Esper,
Mark
who
Esper.
was the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
And George was this compulsive worker. Oh my God, he had to write an afternoon roundup for the AP's clients. So he'd sit down around 11 o'clock in the morning and write the best he could what's been going on. And he had this ability to tell the story as if it were, as it was gripping. And then I was able to look at other things like that. It was a really interesting place to be.
What's funny about your journalism career, if I understand correctly, Reps, is I heard in your previous interview you say that you had previously thought that there's no more authoritarian place than the military, and then you entered the newsroom.
Well,
Yeah, you don't mess around in the newsroom, I've heard.
yeah, that's true.
I didn't know deadlines could be that deadly.
Well, it's deadlines and the editors. Depends on who it is.
Sure, yeah.
But a newspaper, particularly Kansas City Star, and that kind of paper, you learn a lot
I'm sure.
about not making mistakes, about making deadlines, about finding stories. And we all knew that Hemingway started out there. That was lore, but it was a really interesting place to be. And I'd never had to do that before.
I want to bounce around with a few things, and there's a story I want to end on. But you've gotten to be adjacent to some really fascinating historical moments in time, one of which is the Watergate scandal.
Right.
You were not far from the Watergate Hotel when, you didn't know it at the time, no one did, the break-in occurred.
Right.
And then the subsequent fallout from that. You were also present for the dedication of the Vietnam War Memorial.
I was.
Tell us about that ceremony. You got to meet the designer, the Chinese student who designed it.
Right.
What do you remember about that?
Well, I was an editorial writer at the Star when that came along. So the memorial was dedicated in November, Veterans Day, 1982. And it was pretty controversial. It was very controversial by a number of people because it was, if you're familiar with it, it goes down into the ground and then it comes back up on the other side. It's not a man on horseback or, fighter jet or something like that, looking like everybody's a hero. It's down. And that bothered people. Subconsciously, they hated it. Many of them did. Maya Lin, who was a senior at Yale, I believe, in a design course, submitted her drawing or her graphic.
It was a contest, a nationwide contest.
Yeah, and there's a documentary about this. And she was chosen. And she was about 18 or 19. She's 20 years old, something like that. And she's done a number of other things since. But that was kind of her original work. And I told my editor, I said, I was on the editorial page and I was writing about the war and veterans and the stuff we'd suffered and all that kind of stuff. And his name was Jim. He was a veteran of World War II. And I said, I want to go back to Washington for the dedication of the Vietnam Memorial. He said, I'm not going to pay for that. So I said, okay. So I took 5 days of vacation and went back there and went to the dedication. I'm so proud of the fact I got to do that because that meant a lot to me.
Sure it did.
When I got there, I got there a day or two ahead, and I was down walking along the area. I was walking along the wall that points toward the Capitol. And I looked at it, and I saw a name of a guy that was from the fraternity I was in at Westminster.
Wow.
Harmon Rimmel III. And I thought, damn, I didn't know he got killed. It was interesting.
What a strange moment that must have been, having been at Westminster, having this negative experience, feeling that all your peers were these just rich white kids that didn't understand the gravity of the situation. Yeah. And you see a name of a Sigma Chi brother on the wall.
Right, right.
When you first saw the wall, what was your opinion of it?
I was very sober about that. When you look at all those names, you know, if you start at the one end or the other, as you walk down, the names rise up beside you. Myelin told me that this is what she wanted. Your reaction is, oh my God, we lost so many people. It's 58,000 plus a few. And my reaction was, I don't know. I felt overwhelmed by it. And I did. And again, it's like Vietnam. How do you understand that? You know, it's more about our society and our leaders at that time than it was about anything else. But anyway, I was walking down and I saw his name. And one thing veterans say to each other from that period, how many people do you know on the wall? You know? Well, I have several people. And a high school classmate of mine, some other people like that. But I'm very proud of the fact that it's there. I'm sure we'll get past the point where people will even know or care about it. But right now, it's the most visited site in Washington, I think. I've been back several times. One time I was back, and some tourists from Germany or someplace came in. They kind of walked down one side and back up the other side, and that was it. I mean, they'd seen them all. But I got antsy about this, and I wanted to go home back there and volunteer. So somehow I found out who to go to, and I volunteered. I went back there. I signed up as a volunteer. And I carried that big book around that had all the names in it, where they're located, where the people are located. And one thing I learned, we were advised not to say is, "May I help you?" Don't use the word help. They don't want help. Are you looking for a name? What name are you looking for? You do it that way. And that was just something that didn't dawn on me, but that's what it is. But that same time that dedication occurred, we had probably the biggest gathering of Vietnam veterans ever, and there were all kinds of people there. And we had parades, and we had this, we had that. All the hotels were full of vets, and people were just talking about. They were meeting people they'd known, meeting people they didn't know. And that kind of stuff. Then they marched down Constitution Avenue, and I'm doing a story, and there's General Westmoreland, who had been the Supreme Commander before Abrams took over. So Westmoreland is walking along, and I go up and start interviewing. And I don't even remember what he said, and I don't remember what I asked him. But the thing is, I had to write a story, and that was something that was important. You know, you just have to do that.
How did he react to you coming up to him?
Oh, the guys like that, they've talked to so many people.
Sure.
They know how to deal with it. I don't know. Yeah. He had a couple of handy lines he used.
Sure.
But I will tell you that one time I went back there, this was later. I went back, and I always go, whenever I go to Washington, I always go to the wall. So I went to the wall, and there I look over there, and there's my old battalion commander in civvies, in civilian clothes. And I just watched him. And I was thinking, what are you looking for? When he came on, and we had a battalion commander who didn't push us too hard, and therefore we didn't have too many casualties. When this guy took over, our casualties went up. We got into more situations, which of course is what you should do if you're running an infantry outfit. But, what did they die for?
Did it seem more reckless once he took command? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there he was, looking at the wall and names. And I thought, well, I guess that's a reckoning for him. I hope it is.
Yeah. You know what I've heard about the wall?
Have you been there?
I've been several times, and
Good for you.
It truly is a somber. It doesn't matter what time of the day you go. I think the best time is either dawn or dusk, just for that kind of ambiance. But it doesn't matter what time of the day you go. It's an extremely impactful monument. Something I've heard about it that I think really sums up the design that she was going for is it represents a deep wound. It's a cut, because it cuts into the earth quite literally.
Right.
But it also is what I've read as an interpretation of it is that it represents a wound in the United States, a wound in America.
I think that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
This is probably a whole story we could do a whole episode on, but you returned in 1988. You took your daughter. She got to meet her grandparents.
Her
grandmother. So she got to meet her grandmother and a few other relatives. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of this. You got to see.
She was 13 years old.
She was a 13-year-old at that point.
She's a kid.
Did she? I can't help but ask this. I just a few statements from you about the impact of returning in 1988 with your daughter, who was essentially a product of you having been there as a soldier.
Right.
What was the impact of that on you, that trip?
Well, that's one of the most important things we've done in our family. I consider that. I don't know if Lynn, I don't know if Nicola would say that or not. She's the daughter. But I'm extremely proud of the fact that we were able to do that, because we're traveling around. We're going to Vietnam. We first went to Hanoi up north, and we stayed in a hotel, which is really a mess, and it's now a luxury hotel again. But, she got to see her mother's country. I thought that was very important. And I got to go places I'd never been. And I remember at one point we were staying in some place, had been a BOQ, Bachelor Officers Quarters, for Americans. And she she got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and she came back, and there was a big cockroach in front of her, and she just flipped out. But I mean, it's just a different world.
Yeah.
Get to really get to know it.
There's a story that I heard in your previous interview that it's sort of a humorous story, but it's also, in a weird way, a very emotional story about you and your father. You took a road trip at one point. I don't know which year this was.
It's going up to Seattle, Washington.
And it's you and your father. You convinced him to join you. What year was this? Just so I know.
It was 1969 after I got back.
Wow, so soon after you got back. Wow.
Yeah, and I had saved enough money while I was in the Army that I could buy a brand new MGB GT. It was British Racing Careen. I was so proud of that car. It didn't run very well, but I was really proud of it. So Daddy and I got in this car, and we're down kind of low, right? You go by a big truck, and you're looking up a lot. And we drive off, and he's not very happy to be with me. I mean, we were never close, and we didn't talk a lot. But at some point, we stopped in a gas station to fill up. He said to me, "You need to use the bathroom." And I just blew up. I thought, good Lord, all the things I've done, and my dad is asking me if I need to use the bathroom. I lost it. I mean, I got it back real fast. But, I mean, that stayed with me.
Yeah.
And, and now I wish I had him back, because there are a lot of things I want to talk to him about. You know what I mean? And it's just a lot. I mean, that's life. But There was a lot.
Would you mind sharing something that you would say to your father now if you had him back?
I would want to talk about his experiences in World War I more. He always thought I asked too many questions and I talked too much. So he was one of these people who kept a lot of things to himself.
Sure.
But I would have the knowledge now to ask. I have the understanding to be able to ask him questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
I hope you agree with my representation of that story, both humorous but also sort of emotional in this father-son kind of capacity. It's just, to me, it's sort of a beautiful picture of parents never stop being parents. You had gone through war. You had gone through hell and back. You had been an infantry officer in the Vietnam War. You get back, you take a road trip with your dad, and he feels the need to ask you if you need to take a potty break before you get back in the car.
Right. He never stopped being a dad.
Yeah.
But he wasn't what I needed sometimes. That's the difference. And I look at the situation. I have 3 children. My oldest one is with my first wife, and we adopted 2 children with my second wife. So I try to, don't do a very good job of this sometimes, but I try to think, how would I want it to be?
Sure.
What can I say to my child that's helpful? It made me more aware of that, I think.
The last thing I wanted to ask, I want to give the due deference here of your service as a volunteer with the Missouri Veterans History Project, which is a project that the museum is now housing. But you're an interviewer for them, and you've done very many interviews.
Yes, Larry knows.
We were trying to figure out the number earlier.
I was thinking around 25 or 30.
Sounds like it's in the hundreds.
I don't think not that many, but quite a few.
Well, my question is, it's just very simple. What impact has that had on you, being an interviewer for VHP?
Well, it's what I can do. It's what I can do. I'm pretty good at it. You're pretty good at it too, by the way. I'm pretty good at it. I don't gawk at people. I don't ask them how many people they killed. Never do stuff like that. I try to treat them with respect. Anyone who's gone through basic training, whether it's one service or the other, you've been through some stuff. And I try to be respectful of that. And, I'm not one of these people. So people say it so often now, thank you for your service. I blow that off because that's just such an easy line to say. I want to hear more. So I like to talk to people and try to get them to talk to me. It doesn't always work, but I try to do that. Try to bring out their feelings, their emotions, et cetera, et cetera.
Is welcome home an important phrase for you?
Not particularly.
Tell me about that.
It's too easy. It's too glib. That's it. I would rather sit around and drink a beer or have a meal or just talk.
Share a moment.
Yeah. But just to say welcome home, that's something else I want to add. I came back by myself. We all did, pretty much. My parents picked me up. We went out. We were in Kansas City. And they wanted to show me this place that was really pretty good. It was called Pizza Hut. So we went to Pizza Hut in Independence, Missouri or something like that. And the thing I wanted to say, I've thought about what I want to say to you, is that when people go to war, it doesn't make any difference if they're on the front lines or in rear doing support, whatever. They have to come back and live in this world that we're in now. That's hard to do. I still deal with it all the time. I was telling Larry as you're driving out here, I still think about this stuff all the time. I can't get it out of my head. Some people bury it. some people, they seal up and they won't talk about anything. I'm not like that, but I think the one thing I wish people understood is when people go off and put on a uniform, they are changing everything about their lives in many ways. And they deserve to be treated with respect and understanding. And our society, I don't think, does a really good job at that. Maybe you see a movie. That's not the same thing, because I think it can create a chasm between those who served and those who didn't.
I don't think sacrifice is well understood by our society. And I don't think it's really valued any longer.
Well, it's not. And, I've read a lot about World War II and one. And, everybody understood the sacrifices that those people were putting out. But, Vietnam, in the context of the protests and the things about the war, against the war, the people who went to war and came home, what do you do about that? Well, I went back to college, and I'm in touch with one of my history teachers I went to University of Missouri, Kansas City for my bachelor's degree. And I've thought about this. Sitting in a classroom, I was 22, 23 years old. I'd done my time in Vietnam. I'd seen people killed, all that stuff. And then I'm sitting in a classroom with kids who are 18 years old. That's a generation gap right there. And it's, what do I say to them? What do they say to me? And I made I had a fatigue jacket that was an Army uniform fatigue jacket. I wore that all the time. I think I took my bars off because I didn't want to flaunt that. Sure. But I wore that all the time, and I wanted everybody to know that I was a veteran. And I didn't care about the rest of it. It was a real interesting time to be alive, I think. I feel so fortunate to have gone through that.
Reps, it's been an incredible honor to be in your presence this evening. It's been an incredible honor.
No one's ever said that to me before.
Well, it's true. It really is true. Jason and I both feel that way. And it's been an incredible honor to be able to hear your story directly from you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for as another veteran, I'm going to say thank you for your service.
Well, you're welcome.
And I hope it really means something.
It does.
That's all the questions I have, Jason. Thank you.
I'm going to do a little bit of reflection here before we end and go back just a little bit to the wall. My dad actually took me to the wall on a road trip visiting battlefields and from the Civil War all the way through the mall in D.C. and all the different things. And my dad was a huge studier of Vietnam. He had a full library on Vietnam and was a battle technician and tactical warrior. And the thing that I can remember the most is standing in front of the statue of the soldiers at the monument there, and then also the reflection that the wall gives back, that you see the people standing by the wall around you, and that reflection. And I don't know if that designer meant for that reflection to be there. I don't know, because I've never really studied that. But I can remember seeing my dad's reflection and my reflection. I can picture that. And so when I think about reflection and what that means to me in my life, is that I had a next-door neighbor when I lived in Florida. His name was Steve Tuthill, and he was a Vietnam veteran and very close to my dad. They would talk all the time. Of course, my dad was in the military at the time, and Steve was a veteran. And in the middle of the night, Steve would be in his driveway in his lawn chair just staring into space, And my dad would go over and talk to him, and kind of knew, not the same experiences, but was able to see that. And Steve spoke a lot into my life as a young person, even before my dad died and then after. But Steve was in his family were rescuers of race dogs, of greyhounds. They rescued greyhounds. And the compassion, when I reflect on this through my visual of reflecting in the wall, is Steve's name wasn't on the wall because he didn't die in Vietnam, but Vietnam took his life, so to speak. And the way he gave back was through these rescue animals and his compassion to people. And when I think about Vietnam veterans or Vietnam, the story of Vietnam, I think it through the lens of people like Lieutenant here and then also Steve Tudhill.
It reminds me of a book, The Things We Carried, authored by a Vietnam veteran. It speaks on, Reps had mentioned the survivor's guilt earlier. It speaks on the moral injury of combat. We have Lieutenant Hudson here, Purple Heart recipient. There's no visible wounds that I can see from you right now, yet you have those wounds. You have a physical wound from your gunshot wound, but you also have moral wounds from your time in combat. And so, Jason, I really appreciate you mentioning that. I think that's a perfect picture of the toll that the Vietnam War took on everyone.
Well, I would think it also would take it up for anything, any war you're in. I just got in the mail John Hersey's book, Hiroshima. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
So I'm starting to read that because I have this goal to read as many good books as I can before I check out. And so I'm starting to read Hiroshima. And, all you have to do really is start reading about individuals and get down in the dirt. Don't get up high. Get down there where it really happens. That's what matters. I would love to be able to get back together with members of my platoon, but I've had a couple. My point man, Ed Lee, who lives down in Louisiana, he dropped by here every once in a while. We would talk. And as I think I said in the other interview, I don't think people who don't like you are going to be in touch with you so we can get together. I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. So it meant a lot to me that this guy got in touch with me. The medic who took care of me, he's extremely conservative, and he does a lot of Trumpy things, and so we don't keep in touch as much. But I would do anything for him. I would do anything for Ed. I would do anything for anybody in my platoon if I could. I'm just not in touch with them anymore. But you learn so much from being from people from other backgrounds. I'm white. My dad didn't think, he called them darkies. He didn't think darkies and white people should be together. My radio telephone operator was a black guy from the South named Coleman. There's what I wish I could go back to and talk about. If he would talk to me about his experiences in the war and after, I would love to hear what he had to say. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, that's really, really important to me. So these recordings that you're making where we lay down where people put down what people had to say and the way they feel, it's very important to do for the future for people to know.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I agree as well.
Thank you for allowing us to reflect, and I feel a little bit lighter myself being able to say what I just said a few minutes ago. And Reps, it's been an amazing journey with you. Thank you for sharing your story with us, for your perspective. I just find it fascinating that your dad was born in the 1890s. That's
1891.
awesome. That's amazing.
My mother was born in 1906.
That's incredible. Well, we're these young whippersnappers over here, but I'm sure we could probably do this over and over again with all the different things you've experienced. But we're going to go ahead and sign off of the Operation Inside podcast from the Mid-America Veterans Museum.
Operation Insight is brought to you by the Mid-America Veterans Museum, where we believe every veteran has a story. If you agree and you enjoyed today's podcast, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever platform you listen. Don't forget, sharing this episode with friends and family is a great way to support the museum and our mission of sharing veteran stories. Thank you for listening.